10 days before the new semester, Sylvania Academy was less a school and more akin to a city. The academy, having purchased the entire Akeland in the southwestern part of the Kingdishman, for its establishment was so vast that even the alumni hadn't seen all of its places. What does that mean? It meant that if one walked long enough, they would inevitably encounter something. Wandering under the heavy gaze of the other students, I eventually found myself in the undeveloped forests of the northwest part of Akan Island. Most of the academic buildings were on the southeastern side of the island, while amenities for students, welfare facilities, and commercial buildings were clustered on the southwest side. Since there were only 2 bridges connecting the school to the mainland, one to the southeast and one to the southwest, development centered around these areas. After about half a day's walk to the northeastern edge, my legs were so sore that I just plopped down on a tree stump. Let's not leave the island for now, I concluded after spending half a day walking and organizing my thoughts. No matter the situation of my newfound status, I had to adapt and find a way to survive. Sylvania Academy was the creamy de la creme of schools. Every noble household was desperate to enroll their children there. To enroll, one must possess either overwhelming talent or wealth. Having a Sylvania diploma meant you could make a living out of anything. I clenched my teeth, determined to secure my diploma. In this cruel world, there's no asset more valuable. Moreover, choosing to walk out of the school at this point is akin to voluntarily stepping into an unknown and uncharted territory. I had already played through Sylvania's Failed Swordsman several times. If the timeline is right, after Ed Roth-Taylor gets expelled, it's the very beginning of the scenario. Being somewhat familiar with the events that will unfold in this academy, there's a lot I can leverage from my game knowledge as long as I stay within its bounds. There is absolutely no reason to venture out into the unknown that is unrelated to the setting of the work. As I gathered my thoughts, evening had arrived. Sitting alone on a tree stump in a secluded forest, I let out a heavy sigh and rubbed my face warily. Let's see what we have here, Ig. I placed 2 wooden bags on the grass and opened them. Among various clothes, textbooks used for classes, and magical artifacts, none were particularly useful since they were all adjusted for academic learning. It had been a life of grandeur, yet my personal belongings were so few. The realization of such a hollow existence hit anew. Still, even though I've been expelled from my family, I wasn't expelled from the school yet. Without the family's support, I couldn't possibly afford the ludicrous tuition fee, which practically meant expulsion, but presumably, next semester's fee was already paid. If I could secure a scholarship or find a new source of income, I could continue schooling. However, there was a time limiting until the next semester. The scenery is really nice, Ebe. A stream was a little further along, the water flowing from the gentle hills of the northwestern part of Akan Island. I was captivated by the reflection of the moonlight on the water, and the serene setting of the forest, where only the sound of insects could be heard. Not the time to indulge in romance, as one could starve this way. Picking up a branch, I started scratching out what I needed to survive immediately. The goal was graduation. I wrote down the goal on graduation prominently. Ed Roth-Taylor was now a sophomore. 6 semesters were left until graduation. The cost of a semester was around 20 Flen gold coins. enough to buy a whole luxurious carriage. Even that was after cutting down expenses. Typically, Sylvania students stay in top-tier dorms, eat in high-class dining facilities, use the best magical tools for learning, and some even have 2 or 3 attendants at their beck and call. Putting those advantages aside, the first thing to address was the immediate necessities for survival: clothing, food, and shelter. Clothes we have. Whether the environment for washing them will suffice is another issue. But at least for a week, we can avoid looking like a beggar. The problem is food and shelter for tonight. A sigh, another deep breath. However, with renewed determination and a slap to my face, I chastised myself. What will change by constantly sighing? I stood up fiercely and did a set of stretches, loosened my waist and legs, completed the whole national physical exercise routine, and then a set of jumps and push-ups. Feeling physically and mentally refreshed, I remembered the new student entrance exam wasn't far off. Considering the date, there were about 10 days left. Firstly, I needed to secure a sustainable condition to continue attending school. 10 days should be enough to do something. Finding a place to sleep was next. The spring breeze was chilling, and while surviving the night out in the open was viable, it was not an option to sleep directly on the ground. Oh, could I possibly make a temporary tent? A simple shelter wouldn't be too hard to construct. Erect some sturdy branches as supports and cover them with a tarp or something similar, and that would suffice as a shelter with a roof. The northeastern forest of Akan Island is well preserved. Seeing spirits occasionally means that it's almost untouched by humans. There should be plenty of tree branches suitable for support pillars. No use worrying, let's move. There isn't time to dwell on thoughts. Action must come first. I gazed at my reflection in the stream, focusing on the details. Ed Roth Taylor, gender male, age 17, grade 2, race, human, achievements known: strength 3, intelligence 4, agility 7, willpower 7, luck 6, detailed combat ability E, detailed magic ability, detailed survival ability, detailed alchemy ability. In ignoring my meager ability scores, I focused to check the detailed magic ability. Detailed magic ability, young Aranki clumsy magic student, specialty, elemental common magic, fast casting LV 1, mana sense LV 1, fire elemental magic ignition LV 2, wind elemental magic wind blade V1, if the specialty is elemental. Yet, the only elemental magic known are 2 basic spells. It demonstrated the apathy of the student. According to Sylvania's curriculum, elemental magic students choose 2 specialties in their first year. It seems fire and wind were chosen, but if even the basics are barely trained, it shows how slothful the student was. But what of it? As long as there is magic to use, that's good enough. I went further into the woods and felt for the mana in my body. Compared to the overflowing mana of the protagonist characters, mine is incomparably weaker, yet I can still manage to down tree branches suitable for shelter making. With my mana, blades of wind cut through the trees with suitable thickness. If they were too heavy to lift, they'd be useless. Selecting the right size was key. After chopping half a dozen branches, I was already breathless. Clearly, my body isn't adept at mana control. The need for training was evident. What a tough life this is. I spat in frustration, caught my breath, and carried the branches to a sunnier spot. Starting with digging small holes to balance the pillars on flat ground, I erected and interlocked them at a central point. It was not easy managing 4 pillars with just my shoulders and head for support, but I managed. Then I secured the central point with a leather belt taken from my back, a belt from one of the high-quality tunics. The last branch was propped up in the middle. I and the ground dug up around to prevent easy collapse. After much struggle, the semblance of a shelter stood, albeit shaky and precarious. It wasn't pretty, not exactly central, hastily made, and lower than expected. Still, throwing a tent over it provided adequate cover for the night. I considered using some of the clothes in my wooden bag but quickly dismissed the idea. Their volume was too low. Sacrificing clothes I'd need from tomorrow on wouldn't be practical. They could potentially be resoled, and getting them dirty as a makeshift tent didn't seem right. As a compromise, I used 1 or 2 items as bedding to keep off the dirt floor. As for the tent cover, I went back into the 4 inches with large leaves. By the time I completed roofing my shelter with branches, another hour had passed, and the full moon had already risen high in the sky. Wow. Ooh. Have I so tiring? After completing the structure, I stretched fully and wiped my sweat. It was hard work, but finished nonetheless. Here stood a shelter able to provide some respite. Despite all, a sense of achievement flooded me, bringing delight. Ma, you have completed the construction. Your production proficiency has increased. Mo, the list of finished products has been updated. In the message arrived shortly thereafter. Perplexed, I returned to the stream and focused, seeing not that long information window, but a different one flickering before my eyes. Detailed survival ability Jung, rank of novice, craftsman specialty, none dexterity LV4 design LV V1 gathering, V1. So, it seems Ed may be more talented in crafting than in magic. Stat points did seem more concentrated in dexterity over intellect or strength. New finished product Zen, makeshift wooden shelter, a temporary resting place. Crude and flimsy. It looks like it won't last unless regularly maintained. Difficulty of production. It was a welcome window. I wasn't expecting the production system to transplant itself so seamlessly. If I can manage my proficiency in crafting, perhaps other skills are also achievable. A glimmer of hope. Thinking about it, there might be even more ways to overcome the current crisis. But, for now, fatigue weighed heavily on my body and mind. Time for rest was necessary. I quickly laid down in my completed shelter. Sounds of leaves rustling and insects chirping filled my ears. The darkness was settled, and I could hardly see anything anymore. Closing my eyes, I slowly drifted off to sleep. Many troubles remained unsolved, so much to deal with. But for now, let's get some rest first. We'll tackle it after we've recovered. Rest comes first. Once daylight returns, I'll ponder long-term survival strategies at the academy.